Namaste, friends. Let's begin today with a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions. We lay the flowers of our devotion gently at thy feet. Help us to feel the thrill of your love permeating all reality, that we may know the essence of all things is infused with your joy. Make us channels of that light, that willing enthusiasm that draws your love, that we may share it with all. Om, peace, Amen. Our chant this morning is called From Joy. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. The topic that we'll be talking about is enthusiasm, which Swami Ananda says, enthusiasm is the spirit of joy. So as we sing, let's lean into this reality. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I'll melt again. That is our one true reality, our true essence. The very root of all enthusiasm is God's presence. So let's feel that presence now as we sing together. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. The topic of enthusiasm, or I should say the affirmation, the attribute of enthusiasm, is really a thrilling quality for us to consider, because the essence of Enthusiasm is the cultivation of our willingness, our energy, our joyful contribution of everything that we have, all of our consciousness, our focus, our joy, our energy, our willingness, all pointed at one fixed point, all directed in one fixed wave or flow of energy. And this cultivation, it can be directed at anything that we're doing in life. So whether it's a mundane task in the world, or a household chore, or a professional project that we're working on, a familial or friend relationship that we're cultivating energy for, we can bring our enthusiasm to everything that we're doing. And enthusiasm, the root of enthusiasm is entheos. Theos is God. So the root of enthusiasm is in God, which is such a beautiful affirmation for us to consider, that living in a state of enthusiasm and cultivating enthusiasm is in essence about bringing our attunement with the divine. It's about living in God in every moment. Again, no matter what the task, worldly or spiritual, God is present in everything that we do. God is a part of everything that we do. Therefore, when we are living in that state of enthusiasm, when we're cultivating that soul quality of enthusiasm, in essence, we're living more and more in tune with our natural state, the natural state of the heart, which is to expand into joy, into the divine. And we can often mistake enthusiasm for one of those rippling currents of feeling, like excitement or happiness or thrill or pain or anger, those little ripples on the ocean or on the surface of the ocean, those waves that are crashing up and down, those emotional states that bring us to highs and then drop down to lows. Because enthusiasm, it can feel that way when we are acting in excitement and thrill and energy and joyfulness. There's an element of enthusiasm there. But enthusiasm is more subtle than that. Rather than being born of the rippling waves on the current of the ocean's surface, enthusiasm is cultivated in the stillness of the ocean's depths, in the stillness of our own consciousness. It's not one of those impermanent emotional states of being, but it's actually a soul quality. Entheos, in God, enthusiasm, bringing our willing, joyful energy to every activity in our lives. Focusing all of our concentration with great willingness at any task at hand, it calls that divine energy toward us. And we get to cultivate that. It's not actually dependent on anything outside of us, like excitement. I can get excited about or thrilled about something, seeing a new movie, and then I see the movie and it was just okay. Or I can get really excited about a new car, and then the car payment comes in. Oh gosh, now I'm back down. Those moments of excitement and thrill that jolt us up, they inevitably drops us back down. But enthusiasm is born from a much deeper and a much subtler place, where we're actually choosing not to depend on our state of consciousness as it's cultivated in those external realities, but it's actually cultivated from within. And it comes from our own willingness to open our heart and expand into the soul's true nature, into the true open-heartedness, the natural love of the heart, as Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, called it. The natural love of the heart. It's the natural state of the soul to be entheos, enthusiastic, in God, harmonizing with the divine. And as I said, it's not dependent on any of the external circumstances. We can cultivate it in any moment. We can call upon it in any task that we are doing. It's not dependent on the actual task or the job or the obligation at hand, though sometimes we get fooled into thinking that. The ego is good at tricking us into thinking that our enthusiasm is reliant on the external. But in fact, it comes from within. And that's what Swami Kriyananda shares with us in this week's affirmation. So let's read this affirmation together. Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is the spirit of joy channeled through the power of the will. Enthusiasm is the spirit of joy channeled through the power of will. Just to stop at this first line before we go on and read more. Enthusiasm is the spirit of joy. The essence of everything is its spirit. And as we know, the natural state of the world, God is Sat Chit Ananda, ever present, ever existing, ever new bliss. Ever present, ever existing, ever new bliss, joy. It's around us, it makes up all of our reality. It's surrounding us in every moment. The natural state of the world is bliss, and enthusiasm is the spirit of joy. Just as Paramahansa Yogananda teaches that the sound of Om is the sacred vibratory sound of creation, that when God manifested the universe, that sound of Om vibrated out into reality, and it's actually permeated into every element of creation. That sound of Om is the essence of everything that's creating our reality. It's imbued into the spirit of everything that we see around us. That same essence, or we can use that same parallel metaphor to really focus on what it is that what it means to live in a state of enthusiasm, because enthusiasm is the spirit of joy, and everything is joy, everything is bliss. So permeating in the center of every single particle of reality, every circumstance and situation that we find ourselves in, there is that natural state of joy. And the spirit of joy is enthusiasm. So when we bring our willingness, our energy, our enthusiasm to a task, we're actually attuning more and more closely to the fundamental natural state of the universe, because everything is bliss. Sat Chit Ananda, everything is joy and bliss. And we are a part of that. The spirit of that is enthusiasm. So when we practice this quality, we are vibrating in harmony with all that is. We're vibrating more and more subtly and more closely in attunement with that divine consciousness. If we want to know joy, we must live always in the full expectation of it. Not even earthly happiness can come to those who demand it glumly, or who work for it with their eyes to the ground. To achieve happiness, one must work with happiness. To achieve divine joy, one must be keenly enthusiastic in everything that one does. One must be keenly enthusiastic in everything that one does. Remember what I said? The root of enthusiastic is entheos, in God. So to be keenly enthusiastic means to be aware of God's presence in everything that we do. And that's where this reality that enthusiasm is it's not a state of being that's dependent on anything external or anything outside of us, that it can be cultivated from within. It comes from that place of knowing that at the center of everything is that divine consciousness, is that resonance of the divine. And so we have the choice in every moment to choose to be uplifted, to choose to pull ourselves out of those glum slumps, as Swami Kriyananda tells us, or doing anything with our eyes cast down at the ground. Anything that's lowering our energy, that's draining our willingness and our enthusiasm, is taking us further away from God. But again, I keep saying it over and over again, and let me share an example of what that means, to say that enthusiasm, it's not the same as excitement or thrill or any of those impermanent qualities or emotional states, that we can actually choose it in any moment because it is a soul quality, because it is a quality of the divine. That feeling the joy and the willingness in the midst of the activity or the project is our choice. We are the ones who have ownership and control over that state of consciousness. And the first example of this that I was thinking of, I grew up as an athlete. I mostly played water polo in my later years, all through high school and college. And being an athlete, you have intense hours. You're in the pool, or for me it was the pool. I was in the pool all the time, morning practice, evening practice. Sometimes we were practicing 5 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, in the evenings and the afternoons. All of it culminating in these weekly games and tournaments that you would play. So you spend hours and hours of your life training and eating right and working out in order to jump in and compete in these games. And we would go to tournaments every single weekend in college when we were in season, and we would play, game after game after game. And by the end of the day, we were, of course, physically tired because we're in there fighting and struggling and working and playing water polo. But the state of joy, that state of enthusiasm, it wasn't dependent on how many games we won or lost. There was the emotional excitement if we won a great game, or the emotional, kind of downward pulling feeling of like, oh man, if we lost an important game. But the enthusiasm, the willingness to play, was always there. It's not like if we lost the first game in a tournament, we just said, well, that's it, let's throw in the towel. There's no point in continuing on. The joy of playing, the joy of the game was still there. It wasn't dependent on the outward circumstance. It wasn't dependent on the scoreboard or the number of goals or the number of the minutes of playtime that any one of us received. It was about the joy of the game. It was about the joy of being competitive, of being an athlete, of using all of our training in these for water polo, it's short. It's only a 25-minute game for just 25 minutes, hours and hours of training for 25 minutes. And all of our willingness, all of our concentration, our focus, our joyful participation was in the pool for those 25 minutes, regardless of what the score was on the board. And that's how we can cultivate enthusiasm. That's how we can practice it in our own lives. We get confused and distracted and we think, I've done this even with myself. Someone will say, oh, do you want to go on a hike with a group of us this weekend? And I think in my head, well, who's going? Let me see. Before I commit, let me find out who's going. Are those people that I want to go on a hike with? I have the choice. Rather than allowing my enthusiasm, my willing participation to be dependent on who's going on the hike or not, I can jump right in. Yes, I'm going. Here's my enthusiasm. I'm all in. Let me give it my willingness, my joyful participation. This is the essence of enthusiasm. Swami Kriyananda shares a wonderful story about this when he's talking about enthusiasm. And he says that one morning his alarm clock went off for morning meditation. And he didn't sleep well the night before. And he was just feeling kind of the grumblings of slumber, I think are the words that he used, or it was something close to that. And just kind of feeling that if I could just lay in bed a little bit longer, then maybe I would feel a little bit better. Maybe I'd have more enthusiasm for my morning meditation. And how many of us have been there? The alarm clock goes off in the morning and we think, just 10 more minutes. Master, or Yogananda, my meditation will be so much better if I could just sleep for another 30 minutes here, if I could just lay in bed for a little bit longer, then I'll get up and really meditate. But Swami Kriyananda shares that in that moment, as soon as the thought entered into his consciousness, he said he cultivated the enthusiasm to get up out of bed and to sit down and to start meditating. And that joyful participation, that willingness to give all of his focus and concentration to the task at hand, his willingness to cultivate that enthusiasm allowed him to sit down and have a wonderful meditation. And it's a perfect example because it didn't come from anywhere. There wasn't any outside circumstance or situation that he was dependent upon in that moment to cultivate that enthusiasm. That's how we know that enthusiasm is born from within. That again, it's not dependent on, to use my example, the score on the scoreboard or the number of minutes of playtime that I get. And for Swami Kriyananda, it's not dependent on any outward circumstance. It's cultivated from within. That choice to focus our energy and willingness one-pointedly at the task at hand. And the reason that this is such a powerful practice for us is because the more that we can cultivate concentration and the more that we can focus our attention on any one thing, the more we're living in the moment. More we're letting the distractions and the emotional turmoils and the ups and downs and the storms of worldly life, the more that we're letting those go. And we're just focusing one-pointedly on any one thing, on any one decision or task at hand. And when we're living in that present moment, when we're giving everything we have to that one task or that one job or that one meditation, whatever it may be, the natural state of our reality unfolds for us, just like the image of the lotus flower opening up petal by petal. When we're living in harmony, in attunement, in focused concentration on any one activity, then the natural state of the heart, the natural state of the soul, it comes to us. It's cultivated from within. And those are the qualities and the states of consciousness that stay with us. We don't lose them in the turmoils and the ups and downs and of life's storms. We cultivate them from the depths of the ocean, to use the beautiful image that Paramahansa Yogananda uses so often, that our consciousness, we don't live on the rocky surface of the crashing waves on the ocean, but that our consciousness actually rests in the deep silence of the depth of that ocean. And that's where these soul qualities are born. That's where enthusiasm is cultivated from. And that's what we hear Swami Kriyananda reminding us of in the end of this second paragraph. To achieve happiness, one must work with happiness. To achieve divine joy, one must be keenly enthusiastic in everything that one does. We must be keenly enthusiastic, aware of the divine, calling upon the divine, focusing our energy and our attention. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to reserve that quality or that state of being for spiritual practices and calling on the divine. Anytime that we're focusing with concentration and that we're zeroing in and letting go of the ego's pull and tug on those emotional states of consciousness, and we're giving all of our focus and energy to the task at hand, willingly, joyfully, enthusiastically, God can't help but be magnetized to those qualities. Whenever we're practicing something with joyful energy, God's right there rushing in to be with us, because those moments open our heart in a way that we can be receptive to it. Because at the end of the day, all of these qualities that we're sharing in this book, Affirmations for Self-Healing from Swami Kriyananda, they're just helping us to open our hearts in receptivity more and more to the divine. Each one of these soul qualities, that's the essence of what it helps us to do, to open our hearts. And we can know that truth when we live in moments where we feel lost, where we can't feel the enthusiasm. And I'm sure all of us have experienced that on one level or another, those moments where we just feel like we can't find the joy, we can't find the enthusiasm to finish the task at hand or the project or whatever it may be. We feel so distant from the divine. We feel closed off and contracted, don't we? Anytime that joyful state slips away, that we let it just slip through our fingers like sand, we lose the essence of that attunement with the divine. It's not that God has gone anywhere, but it's just that we've contracted in. The veil of delusion has just covered us enough that we've gotten lost for just a moment. But enthusiasm, willingness, joyful energy, uplifted, willing effort, all of these are qualities that the divine feels and is attracted to and is magnetized to. So when we choose to practice enthusiasm, when we choose enthusiasm, we're automatically magnetizing God's presence to us. Enthusiasm, entheos, in God, keenly enthusiastic in everything that we do. Never presume, never brush aside the subtle feeling of doubt which attends false emotional enthusiasm. Try always to let God's joy express itself through you. Try always to allow God's joy to express itself through you. Thus, your enthusiasm will grow, eventually to become His joy, which is, of course, where we're all headed, to feel the divine flowing through us, to see God as the doer in everything that we do. All it takes is our willing devotion, our willing effort every day to remember, yes, here I am. Let me bring all of my energy to the task at hand. We don't have to label or identify something as spiritual or professional or familial or whatever it may be. Everything that we do is an opportunity and an invitation to invite God into our lives more and more closely, simply by practicing enthusiasm, by cultivating it from within. Here I am, just like Swami Kriyananda when the alarm clock goes off. Here I am, yes, I'm ready to meditate. That's born from within. We don't need to rely on anything outside of ourselves. It comes from within. So let's practice our affirmation together once or twice, taking it more and more deeply inside, feeling the roots of that enthusiasm from within, cultivating it so that we can always rely on it, even in those moments where it may feel like it's slipping away, that it's our choice, that we can remember that it is our choice to cultivate it, that we can call upon it in any moment. So please feel free to repeat after me. In everything I do, my enthusiasm soars to embrace infinity. In everything I do, my enthusiasm soars to embrace infinity. And taking it more deeply within. In everything I do, my enthusiasm soars to embrace infinity. Once more with deep concentration at the point between the eyebrows, just listening to the words and taking them within. In everything I do, my enthusiasm soars to embrace infinity. Listening to the prayer. O perfect bliss, guide me that I express thee through my every feeling. May my enthusiasm be a channel for thy joy. O perfect bliss, guide me, that I express thee express thee through my every feeling. May my enthusiasm be a channel of thy joy. I love the way that he ends this prayer by calling upon God, O perfect bliss. May my enthusiasm be a channel that expresses thy joy. Open our hearts. Feel that lotus flower opening up petal by petal, allowing willingness, excitement, joy, creativity, inspiration, intuition to flood through our hearts. Because this is the state of enthusiasm. All it takes is a willingness to say yes, a willingness to jump in to the pool of life, to use the metaphor from my water polo days, to jump right in, ready to go. Whether it's 5 a.m. and the water's cold, whether it's the middle of a game and we're down by 3 points, whether we're thriving and we're up by 5 points and we're just having the time of our lives. In every single moment, jump in willingly, head first, dive in with the divine. Feel his love, feel that grace flowing through us. In everything that I do, may I practice enthusiasm. May I feel your presence. Be in the present moment with the divine. Jump in. God bless you.